So I'm not standing behind it because I'm scared of you, although I am a little bit scared of you. I have to do my slidey thing because I haven't got a fancy clicker. So thank you very much for coming today. I'm going to do a talk on performing research with disabled participants. Who am I? I do user research, and I'm quite passionate about making sure that everybody is included in that research. And so I've performed research with lots of different types of people, but also with participants who have varying different disabilities. And over the years of doing that, I've kind of like got my learnings, I've sort of noted things down, you have like checklists and that kind of thing. I've kind of built that up over this time. And after the last time I did it, I came to the realization that I had a whole load of tricks that I kind of had in my pocket, and I thought it would be quite nice to share it with people. So this talk isn't an in-depth explanation of doing research with participants. I'm also not going to explain all the different types of disability or why you should be doing it, because I'm hoping that you're here, so therefore you know you should be doing it. But this talk is about the sort of practicalities of actually performing the research and making sure that it goes well for you and the participant. However, for any research, we try to include the right kinds of people, right? So we're like, I need X number of these people, 50% gender split, good age range of my user types. They must be in this bracket of earnings or whatever it is. And then this is also that we can get a good variety of needs and pain points to build a product that meets and resolves them. And the thing that I struggled with over the years is that not all people are included in that. Obviously, don't include people that literally aren't going to ever use your product, but why aren't people who have disabilities included in the research stage? I'm not talking about accessibility testing. I'm talking about discovery level foundational research, usability testing all the way through, concept testing, all of these different things. I think I have a list of it at some point. And that really annoys me. And sometimes I rant quite a lot about the fact that these things aren't ever considered. And one more thing, I said I wouldn't give it detailed description, but there's lots of different types of disabilities, and these are just some of them. But there's also other things, like I have suffered from temporary disability over the last 6 months. So when I first started my contract job, my most recent one, I had a broken ankle. And then literally 6 weeks after, when the cast came off, the next day I broke my hand. And so then I had a cast on my hand. So these are two examples of temporary disability. Holding a baby, having children running around you, just lots of different things can affect your ability to access things. And we need to take those into consideration. And there's a link here just to some really good information about accessibility, and it's the fundamental section. So it's just giving you a really good foundational understanding of that. I often find it's quite useful if you're trying to explain it to your company or something like that. It's quite good to have something to show them. So yeah, I think I've already done why this talk. But we do a lot of things like we code accessible code, we do code reviews and accessibility audits. And then when we've built the thing, we do accessibility testing. And that kind of goes back to my thing of like, why aren't these people included in actually building the thing to meet their needs, to meet everybody's needs? So yeah, I've already said this. So include everybody in interviews, workshops, concept testing, field studies, A/B testing, diary studies. There are ways to make all of these things accessible to allow everybody to be involved in forming the thing you're trying to build. So I think and please, I would also like other perspectives on this. I hypothesize that part of the reason that people aren't included in these more foundational aspects in the discovery stage is because people often assume that the needs and pain points of disabled users will be identical to abled users. But you don't assume that one set of particular characteristics of your abled audience is going to be identical to another set of characteristics of your abled audience. So that just seems like a really weird, to me that seems odd, but I think it might be one of the barriers. And I also think people are scared of what they don't understand, or shy away from things that they think might be difficult. And it's not shameful to admit that that could be the cause. What's shameful is not to try and overcome that. I have done a lot of things in my career that I was trying for the first time. Let me say, the first time I ever talked in public, I got really, really drunk because I was absolutely petrified. And I'm a little bit calmer this time, and I'm not drunk, not had a sip. And that's through practice, because I faced the thing that scared me, and then I tried it again and again, and I got better. So, yeah. Anyway, on to the tips. So, I've learned some stuff. That's that slide. So ask your participants how they would like their disability referred to. Now, this is just good manners, because different people prefer different language, and it's really good practice to just ask what their preference would be. So a really good example, I was interviewing a lady who had Friedrichsen ataxia. Yeah, I think that's how it was said. And I asked her how she would prefer me to refer to her condition. And she said Freddie. And that's her name for it. So throughout the rest of the interview, we talked about Freddie. It also lightened the mood, you know, so we chuckled about it. And then anyway, so that's just a good example. Some people prefer the word deaf. Some people prefer hearing impaired. Just another example. Don't worry about saying something stupid or that you think then, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. So for example, what do you look for in a, I don't know, web page to a visually impaired person? Because it's a turn of phrase. It's like, oh, is that the way we say it? Everyone says it, it's fine. So don't get caught up in saying the wrong, or get yourself all kind of anxious about saying the wrong thing. Just say stuff, and you know, if it's a problem, people will say, and you don't do it again. Be clear in your intro that if people want to take a break at any point, that they can do so. This is something that is included in any research, but I think it's really important to include it in performing research with people with access needs, because certain things can be more tiring. And also, if you feel the other person is needing a break, but they're not saying anything, just say, oh, I'm going to grab a coffee, do you fancy one? Or I'm just going to nip to the toilet. And that gives them that space if they need, like, you know, it's just, again, I think it's just kind of manners. An example was, I had a young girl, I was doing research with teenagers, and she was talking about how she was being bullied for because she was deaf, and she started to cry. I asked if she wanted to stop, and she said no, but I said, okay, well, I'm going to just pop to the toilet because I could really do with a wee, just to give her some space. So make sure that you offer a BSL interpreter, and also offer to pay for that, or if they would prefer, say that they can also, if they feel more comfortable bringing their own, or bringing a family member or friend who can do it, then again, you know, that's cool, whatever makes people comfortable. Another one, so this could be, I've experienced this most with with young participants, but I've also experienced it with people over 18. Make sure that you tell them that they can bring their carer or caseworker or a family member or friend to make them feel a bit more comfortable. And I think that kind of applies to, especially when you're talking about sensitive things. That's really important to mention, but frankly, I just say it all the time to anyone. Make sure you schedule a break in the middle of sessions and this applies to people who have brought carers as well, but specifically I've experienced it with people who are hearing impaired, and the action of signing is quite tiring. So the interpreter also and the participant could do with a break in the middle. So I always add 15 minutes in the middle. Don't always need it, but just add it in. Common courtesy, really. Consider the language you're using at all times. When I say all, again, this applies back to anyone. Plain English. I have heard researchers use jargon and acronyms, stuff that people just isn't like regular common language. Don't do it, ever. But in particular, when you're working with people with cognitive disabilities or learning difficulties, and also sign language is not a direct translation of the Oxford Dictionary. So certain words can be a bit more not as common. I remember when I was at university, my tutor was deaf, and him and his BSL interpreter had actually created a new sign language for the stupid art words. Anyway, so that's an example of something that's really not that connected. The last research that I did, I had several autistic participants, and I was really fortunate because the content designer I was working with has an autistic son and also had worked for the Autistic Society. So she gave me quite a few tips. And so make sure that your questions are direct. I know in research we often want to ask quite open questions, but that can be quite confusing for people with autism, and they're not always entirely certain of what it is you're asking them. So I created a separate interview guide for my participants with autism so that my questions were more direct. Also, I gave the questions to the participants in advance because they need time to process what the question is asking them. And it meant that it also reduced the anxiety that they felt during the session. The last time I gave this talk, someone said, do you think that this would apply to people who do suffer from anxiety and other cognitive disabilities? And I think that that was a really good point. So yeah, probably I'd do that too. They also said that, so they were asking about, would giving them the questions in advance sort of bias the answers they gave? And I think my answer to that then, and still, is that it depends on what you're trying to find out. If you're trying to find out instant reactions to things, then yeah, this is probably not the right approach. But if you're trying to understand things that they feel and experience, needs and pain points that already exist, then you're not biasing the findings by giving them advanced preparation, because those things already, they already have those things in their minds. This was a really interesting thing, and I'd never even thought about this. So, ooh, brilliant. Sometimes it depends on the sort of what's the right word for this? The severity of the autism, and I'm not sure if that's the right language, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. If you do things that are repetitive, sometimes people with autism will mimic. So in research, I often nod a lot rather than saying anything like or yes, or I just nod, so that the participant knows that I am listening to them, but I'm not interfering with what they're saying or their thought processes. However, my friend who I mentioned, who's an expert in these things, she said that can be a bad thing, the nodding. So what she said to do, and I did this, is wait until they finished and then explicitly say at the end that I have acknowledged what they've said. So they know that they've answered the question that I asked and that I've heard what they had to say. So consider remote research for people who, or going to people's homes, for people who struggle to leave their homes. So mobility, agoraphobia, anxiety, OCD. And this works in certain circumstances and it doesn't in others. So in terms of remote and doing it via video calling, video conferencing, that doesn't work very well for people who are blind or have cognitive problems, because I don't actually know of any video conferencing software that's accessible. So yeah, that's probably not a good idea in those situations. And also with the anxiety thing, agoraphobia and other things, actually going into the person's home could be a good idea. Also, anxiety could be a bad idea. So it's kind of one of those, think of it as an option to do your research, and maybe in some circumstances, like in one study, you'll do it remote, you'll do it in person, and then you'll do it in the lab. So you'll kind of do a mixture to meet the needs of your participants. Assistive technology. So often people have their technology set up specifically for them. They're using a combination of different tools, and it's all been refined perfectly for what they need. So offer to say that they can bring their stuff in. However, some of it can be quite cumbersome. So offer to pay for a taxi if your budget allows for that, which I think it should. And if that is just not feasible, then make sure that you can provide as best a mimic of what they've got. Because otherwise it's just like, I don't know, it's like asking someone to use something they're completely unfamiliar with and then for it to be completely natural. And then allow time for the setup. It can take 15 minutes to 30 minutes for somebody to set up their gear. So account for that in your scheduling. And then my final one, and I think this is one I've not been very good at, but the last time I did research, some of the subject matter was quite difficult. And I made sure that in between my sessions, I didn't just give myself the standard 15 minutes. I gave myself like a good half an hour to an hour, because I was upset after some of them. I allowed myself time, and then I also made sure that I had someone I could talk to. Obviously, you're not going to disclose the specifics of or identifiable information, but just allow yourself to care for yourself, because sometimes you can hear some quite upsetting things about life. And that again applies to able, disabled, look after yourself. I think that's everything. I talk quite fast. Yeah.